please hit that subscribe button. Hey everybody, better suited to win the Stanley Cup this season. If you are new to the channel, Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins.
Locked on and he scored! And we're live. Hey everybody, what's going on? Another video today. Really excited about this one. We're going to be talking about the St. Louis Blues, and I am joined by a very special guest. We have subscriber Jack L52. You guys see him in the comment section all the time. You see him on the streams all the time. And he's a really big Blues fan. So we're going to be discussing St. Louis, their season this year, and just their outlook ahead as we head into hopefully the NHL playoffs here in the next few weeks. So Jack, I really want to thank you for being on. It's awesome to have you here. And I guess we'll start, before we look forward, we'll look back and just, what do you think of the Blues this year, coming off a Stanley Cup win in 2019, a complete roller coaster year in 2019 that they capped off the best way possible. What do you think of the team this year and how they performed?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, John. The team this year, we had a little bit of a rough December in there, but we overall were pretty good over the whole season.
Yep.
The Blues, coming off their Stanley Cup win, I didn't think they performed well out of the gate because they were really tired after that run. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly was playing through broken ribs during the playoffs, which that's got to be excruciatingly painful. The Blues, when they won the Stanley Cup, it was I kind of saw it as bittersweet because I didn't think they would ever get back again, just because, I just didn't know that the team would be able to get back there again. But this year, the team is they were first in the conference in the regular season. So that's kind of nice to see they're first in the West, just ahead of Colorado. And the team performed pretty well overall, despite the fact that Vladimir Tarasenko went down after Game 10. He suffered a shoulder injury, and he basically missed the rest of the season and was supposed to come back right before we had the pause. So, So I think that they'll do pretty well. I mean, Binnington, it's probably a good thing we also had the pause because Binnington was pretty much run into the ground this year. I mean, Allen played really well when he played, but we were playing Binnington way too much this year. And his stats, you see his stats are kind of average. So that was kind of where I was concerned that maybe they were wearing him down.
Mm-hmm.
But, with this break, it should definitely help the Blues, especially Tarasenko. Tarasenko's had like 4 months now of extra time to recover, and he's already had 2 shoulder surgeries over the past 2 years, and it's the same shoulder. I think it's either the left or the right shoulder, I don't remember, but he needs those shoulders back in the playoffs because we need him.
Absolutely. I think the first thing that jumps out to me is getting Tarasenko back. That is absolutely massive for this team. I mean, he's one of their top goal scorers, certainly a huge piece of that top 6. And you talk about Binnington. I was impressed with Binnington this year. I think Binnington this year proved that he is last year wasn't just him getting hot. He is a legitimate, great NHL starting goaltender, and he can lead a team to first place in the conference. And it wasn't, he came up midway through last year, and he was a guy that, just immediately was so hot right out of the gate. And that whole team turned around with Binnington's call-up. And then he just ripped them through the playoffs and went all the way to win the cup. And people were like, is he really this good of a goaltender, or did he just get really hot for a 6-month stretch here? And all the cards fell correctly. I think this year Binnington proved he's a legit starting NHL goalie, and a very good one.
Yeah, and the funny thing about Binnington is that when he first came up, I remember his first win was a shutout against Philadelphia. And then the next game after that, they played, I believe, Montreal. And Montreal was like, we're not going to beat – I don't know that we can beat Montreal because usually St. Louis doesn't do well against Montreal for the most part. But we won. And Binnington made some huge saves. And I was like, this kid is awesome. I mean, he'd been in the minors for like 8 years or something like that. We got him.
It was a while.
The draft pick that we drafted him with was what we got back for Eric Brewer, ironically. So Eric Brewer was traded from Tampa. And he's been retired for like 5 years now. So, that tells you how important drafting is and how patient you have to be with goaltender. And Binnington, I will say, in the playoffs that last year, the reason he didn't win the Conn Smythe is because he had too many games where he was just did not have good numbers. I mean, you saw that in the finals where he had a really poor 2 games or something like that. I mean, he got pulled in the finals, so that's why And I didn't think he was going to win the Conn Smythe anyways. I mean, Brask outplayed him for the most part during the finals, and yet the Blues won. So that was
7.
yeah. I know that's hard for you. I root for Boston too.
Yep.
Boston's my number 2 team. So I was kind of torn with that finals. I thought that's the perfect situation, and it just wasn't so much. But getting into the season this year, so this year, and I'm going to check on. Let me go to Hockey Reference real quick because I want to make sure I get this correct because it's been a while since we've seen hockey, so I want to make sure I get all these stats right.
Yeah, it's been too long.
Yeah, so this year, we have. I mean, Zach Sanford this year, he was playing on the top line with Ryan O'Reilly and David Perron. David Perron really works well with Ryan O'Reilly. I mean, when we first traded him out, the Blues were like, "Oh, we miss him." And then he came back and he had a really poor playoffs in 2017. That's why he was left exposed in the expansion draft. And that was consistency was the issue with Perron. And then he had a great run with Vegas, and we brought him back, and he gelled really well with Ryan O'Reilly. And we placed Zach Sanford. We tried that combination, I believe, last year. And this year he's been playing primarily with Ryan O'Reilly and David Perron. And while his point totals, I'm going to be honest, I would not want to put him on the first line, but if he works well with them, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but the season overall was pretty good for St. Louis. Jaden Schwartz had a bounce-back season. I knew that would happen. I knew that last year his shooting percentage was like 6% or something like that. It was really low, so and he was injured too. And then Braden Shen, he had a pretty good year this year, although he did sign an 8-year extension, which I'm really worried about because there's no way he'll be able to finish that contract in the end because of the way he plays. He plays a physical style game.
Yep.
Yeah, Alex Pietrangelo, 52 points from the blue line. That's important. He had a great year. Pietrangelo has been my favorite Blue. If they lose him this summer, I'm going to be livid. I'm serious because if we lose him, we're done. We're done. Because Parayko, I know everybody loves Parayko, and I love Parayko too. He can't move the puck like Pietrangelo can, and he also doesn't have the nice, smooth transitions in general like Pietrangelo does. So yeah, and yeah, our forward core was pretty good, and I actually do have. So Tarasenko will probably slot in on the second line with Shen and Schwartz once we come back, and then it should be Steen, Bozak, and Thomas. Robert Thomas had a pretty good coming out party this year. I mean, it was kind of last year when he came out. But he had 10 goals and 32 assists. So I would like those point totals to be a little bit higher, the goal totals to be a little bit higher. And I probably prefer him to be at his natural position a little bit more often. He's been playing mostly on the wing.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the fourth line, it'll likely be Sammy Blais, Oscar Sundqvist, and Ivan Barbashev. And Mackenzie McEachern will not be probably in this lineup. So, yeah, that's probably what we're going to do for this one.
To talk about Parayko, I love Parayko, but to me, I don't see him as that number 1 elite guy.
Yeah,
he's better suited in that number 3 role where he can anchor that second pair. I think that's an ideal role for him. I can't see Parayko replacing Pietrangelo.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, I don't know what when they traded for Justin Faulk, and I want to talk about Justin Faulk real quick. We need to talk about it because when he got traded to St. Louis, I remember saying at the time, I'm like, are we just getting him to fix the power play? Because remember, the power play for St. Louis during the playoffs was awful. So that's what I was thinking at the time. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. But at the same time, I'm like, but he wanted an extension before he got traded. So we gave him the extension. And I'm like, oh, God, because there's no way he's going to be able to live up to that contract. And sure enough, I knew it wasn't going to be a good fit because we had Parayko and Pietrangelo already. And we put like Faulk on the penalty kill in a lot of cases, which, I mean, Faulk, killing penalties is not the worst thing in the world, like if you're a defenseman, because you just got to move around a little bit. But Faulk's more of an offensive guy, not a defensive guy. Yeah. And when he's not scoring, those mistakes tend to show up a lot more. And he had only 16 points this year, and he was playing 20 minutes a game too. So
that's rough.
Yeah, it was rough this year. And, I hope Faulk bounces back, but there's no way he's going to bounce back on St. Louis. He's got to get traded. Mm-hmm. Problem is his contract will probably prevent that from happening, especially now that we know the salary cap's not going to go up for the next couple of years.
Yep.
He's probably stuck here, and he probably wants – he admitted in The Athletic, there was a made by Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic. Mm-hmm. He's our guy here in St. Louis. He's one of the writers here. And he basically – Faulk said, I had a terrible year, and he admitted it. And I thought that was kind of strong of him. But, it just was not a good fit for him here this year. So – yeah, and considering that we re-signed Scandella for 4 years, Scandella, I'm not a huge fan of the term, but I mean, he's a good a good stay-at-home guy, so that's good. And
Yep.
yeah, Jay Bouwmeester, we know he's not going to be
He's
playing.
not coming back. No.
No chance of that. I mean, Rich Peverly never played again after he had his heart attack, so that was there's no chance that'll happen. And when I heard about it, I was like, Rich Peverly.
It was almost the same thing, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, he just fainted on the bench, and I was like, oh my god. And of course, and ironically, the last game he played was that rescheduled game before we had the pause, so that was kind of interesting. Vince Dunn, who I love Vince Dunn. Good defense. Yeah, and he's going to be expensive. The thing is, I think he has the ability to be a top 4 defenseman. I don't know top 2 necessarily. I don't think he has that ceiling, but he's been a good defenseman for us for a while. I mean, he's only played like third pairing minutes for the most part, so that's going to be. I hope he can play more, but we'll see. I mean, I remember he laid out a big hit. I forget who it was on. Against the Calgary Flames. Was it Mangiapane, I believe? And then Zach Rinaldo jumped him, and that was I hate
one of my favorite hits of this year.
Yeah, that was an awesome hit though. And then there was the remember the game where where a bunch of the female hockey players were commentating the games.
Yes.
Yeah, that was one of the games. It was between Chicago and St. Louis, and there was a lot of stuff that happened, but that's another story for another time. We'll get to that later. But anyways. Yeah, I do like the way that this team is constructed from top to bottom. Down the middle, we're strong. I mean, that was the major problem with us a couple years ago. We finished, I think, with 111 points in 2014. Down the middle, we had David Backes, Vladimir Sobotka, Derek Roy, Patrick Berglund, and I believe who was our 4th line center that year? Here, let me look. I have it written down on here. Max Lapierre. So, yeah. Yeah, that was our center core a couple of years ago, and getting Schenn and O'Reilly definitely helped turn it around. And
big time.
When we traded for Schenn, we had to pay a huge price to get Schenn because we wanted to get rid of Laterra's contract, and so we had to pay 2 first-round picks for that. But it was worth it. I mean,
worth it, absolutely.
I mean, Joel Farabee's a good player, but I don't know where he would slot into St. Louis's lineup. So yeah, but anyways. But yeah, and then Robert Bortuzzo or Carl Gunnarsson, I don't know who will play in that position, whatever. I'm thinking Gunnarsson in the skill games will play in the skill games, but in the games where you need to be a little bit, you need to kind of lock teams in.
Bortuzzo, yeah.
Yeah, Bortuzzo, I hope to God he doesn't get in trouble again, because he got a 4-game suspension, and I was so mad at him when I saw that happen. He basically told the ref, I'm not going to look, you're going to call me for this? And cross-checked Arvidsson in the back and messed up Arvidsson's back, and he's not been the same since that hit. And or the cross-check is my bad.
Yep.
Yeah, I was so livid at that. And hopefully that doesn't happen again. That I don't think that'll happen again because but yeah, he drives me nuts because of those. But other than that, he's a good defenseman overall. So and Carl Gunnarsson, last year he played, I believe he got injured like every game he came back, he got hurt somehow, some way, and he was gone for a long time. He's a good defenseman. I think people tend to underrate how good he is.
Very solid depth guy for that bottom pair.
Yeah, I've always liked Carl Gunnarsson. I mean, I feel so bad for the guy because he gets hurt all the time. So it's, and then in net we have Binnington, who's going to be our starter, and then Jake Allen, who's our backup. Gotta be honest, I'm not a person who gets on him at all because I feel like he gets a lot of flack from people here in St. Louis. No offense to anybody who's out here. So I know that's going to make a lot of people upset when they hear that from me. But yeah, it's just in here that's the problem with Allen. That's what I see. That's how I see it. So
yep, I agree with that.
Yeah, because goaltending is a psychological. Most of it is psychological. Some of it is physical. Like you got to be talented enough to do it, and because some goalies they just can't make the saves. But it's usually a confidence issue, like for the most part, and I think that's what it is with Allen. But yeah, I mean, it looks like a pretty good team right now.
So just to finish up here, what do you think they do in the playoffs this year? How far do you think this team can go?
I want to be optimistic and say they go win the Stanley Cup, but I don't see that happening again this year because it almost never happens.
Yeah, back-to-back is really tough.
It almost never happens. I mean, Pittsburgh did it, but they were the outlier, and they also had the talent to do it. I mean, when you got Malkin and Crosby, you can do that. But yeah, I mean, that's the crazy part. Is usually in the past we usually saw the same teams win, but usually back-to-backs are pretty rare before the lockout. The salary cap really helped a lot of teams. Of course, the St. Louis Blues after the lockout were awful to start out the gate because ownership issues that we had here, and then it wasn't until 2012 that we finally got back up on top of the mound again. And yeah, it's fun to watch how this team has evolved. I mean, Alex Pietrangelo and Alex Steen have been really the guys that we've built around this whole time. Like, they've been here since the beginning.
Yep.
Yeah, Alex Steen, one of the best. I mean, really good defensive forward in general. Like,
oh, absolutely.
And great penalty killer too. Yeah, I remember when. So I was. This is before I started watching hockey. He got traded from Toronto. Toronto gave up on him too early. He was having a really awful season. He got traded for Lee Stempniak, and that, of course, came back to bite Toronto. So any Toronto fan,
trade for Toronto.
Yeah, that was one of those trades. Rask for Raycroft was also one during that era that was bad. So it was those two trades that really killed it for Toronto.
Toronto's had some awful ones. There.
I don't mean to be hard on Toronto or anything like that. So
I'll be hard on Toronto. That's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, I just think that this team. I'm not. I think they have the ability to go to the finals, but I'm not betting that they'll go because of the fact they won last year. Yep. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I mean, everybody's been off the Blues needed the rest. I mean, we had a lot of guys that were hurt coming into the break. I mean, Colorado had a lot of guys that were hurt. Like, they needed the break, or else I think they would have had a lot of trouble in the playoffs if it was Colorado. But St. Louis, we only had one major injury, and that's not a big deal. But there were probably a lot of guys that were beat up going into the playoffs. And when you play that many games between the finals and the next season, it can be really difficult to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I want to be optimistic, but I will have to see who St. Louis plays, because we don't even know who St. Louis is going to play right now.
Actually, there's still a lot that we have to figure out as far as who even is making the playoffs out of this play-in.
Yeah, and honestly, that's part of the reason I was not. I mean, now we know that there's going to be a 50-team list now. 50-player list now. So, and then there's unlimited number of goalies. So that's when we'll know who will play. And of course, we know there's certain guys that can't play because of health conditions, asthma, diabetes, anything like that. So that'll be interesting to play. The Blues, none of those guys have those problems. And we knew Bouwmeester was not going to return. I mean, he's going to retire this year, I would think, after this season.
I would expect Bouwmeester's done.
Yeah, good long career for Bouwmeester. I mean, he had an Ironman streak there for a while.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And he was, the contract he got in St. Louis, I feel like that kind of made a lot of people get upset at him a lot of the time. And at times, usually I was actually pretty upset with him last year because he had just come back from hip surgery, I believe, if I remember correctly, which if you're a defenseman, that can really affect your style of play. And he's a skater, so that really he really leans on his skating for his abilities, and that just threw him off early in the season. We were playing him way too much. I don't know why we were playing him as much as we did. And then we put him on the second pair with Parayko, and he played better. So that was, and he was awesome in the playoffs too. Like, he was pretty much, I never got mad at him during the playoffs because he never made any mistakes during the playoffs. So that was awesome. But yeah, it's sad that his career had to end this way. I mean, we knew he was probably going to retire at the end of this year because he signed a 1-year deal, but yeah, it was a nice run for Bouwmeester. But yeah, St. Louis, hopefully they do well, but we'll just have to wait and see.
All right. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on. It was really great to have you and talk hockey and talk the Blues.
Yes. I don't have a lot of people who I can talk hockey with, outside a couple of people who watch the Blues on a regular basis. And yeah, so it was this. Thank you for having me on. You were such a great person to listen to, just because, and because, the Bruins pretty well. And I watch the Bruins a lot too. So you can kind of see that too. So thank you so much for having me on. So
of course, anytime. It's great. And, that's pretty much going to do it for this one, everyone. So like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, a link to our Patreon and merch store in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much again for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.